Alex says, "Hey Bradley, do you have any news on how the RankBridge agent thing is going? ARB agent thing, that's RankBridge. I got Entity Ranker AI, but I haven't had much time to mess with it. Thoughts? Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you, Alex. I haven't had much time to mess. I mean, I've spent at least 12 hours in setting that up and building out the SOPs as I'm doing it because it is very tedious. Um, I have not finished the full setup process even yet, and it's been 2 months I think since I purchased the software. So I just haven't had the bandwidth, and I just moved, and that screwed me up. So until I get more caught up, I'm not going to really be able to. But I've been thinking that's again back to the first question, Alex. Just to be clear, I just spent all that time talking about that because I've been thinking a lot about this for the last few weeks as far as what we should be doing. That is one particular way to do exactly what I just talked about. The rank RB agent, which is RankBridge, Peter Drew's product, it's a tool that automates partially the mass production and publishing of content across multiple platforms. So everything that I just described in the previous answer, the answer to the previous question, I mean, was a lot of that was influenced by what I have learned through what Peter Drew has been teaching as part of the RankBridge stuff. So I want to give full credit to Peter for that. I think his particular tool, from my experience, not even getting through the full setup and execution of a run one full time yet, because it is very tedious. There's a ton of setup. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I just know that I think that there may be some other ways to do it also, um, that might be a little bit easier to set up. Now, I don't know that because I haven't gotten through it. I've got some testing going on. Guys, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, I think it was. But Syndication Academy, which is now called Brand Expander because we got rid of the syndication component, I believe that could be revived. Not as it was from several years ago, because if you guys, some of you will know what I'm talking about, but Syndication Academy was really about using ifttt.com. So if this, then that.com, ifttt.com, but to create these, what they call applets, which were basically where you would take content from a particular source, usually the money site blog or a YouTube channel, and you would from or both, and you would connect them to other platforms, branded blogs, social media, bookmarking sites, document sharing sites, things like that. So you could then republish a post. So I would always use for in Syndication Academy, we taught to use an RSS trigger from the main websites, the blog, or a YouTube connection. Either way, whenever you publish content, it would then republish that content across all the different other accounts that you had connected. And it would be an attribution link, so a link citing the original source, just like in press releases, right? In press releases, there's the original, and then there's all the copies. The copies all have an attribution link that point to the original. So whoever the original publication is, then all the others have a link that points to it, right? Because it's saying that the original, this is republished from this original source. And so that's what we would do with IFTTT, with the Syndication Academy training. But over time, that republishing of the same content, so it was copies. People say, well, isn't that duplicate content? No, it's duplicate content on the same domain. But when it's the same content republished on different domains, it's the original and in copies. It's not duplicate content. Okay. And so we would do that, but it took it over time, that kind of the effectiveness waned. It was very, very powerful for several years. And then over time, that kind of the effectiveness of that declined a bit. And so we eliminated the syndication part of it, but the valuable part for a few years there was still building additional branded assets, optimizing them properly, interlinking them with other assets, all of that. And so we continued the Brand Expander training. We rebranded it as Brand Expander training instead of Syndication Academy training because part of the Syndication Academy training was going out and finding all the different platforms that you could create a profile on that then could be connected to auto post to, if that makes sense. So the Brand Expander training eliminated the syndication component, but kept the building of additional profiles because that helps to build authority, branded location authority when you're talking about a local business. Okay. However, I think now because of AI, we have the ability, and I started testing with this a couple of weeks ago before I started my move. Then I started my move and I haven't touched it since. But I set up an N8N, to start developing an app that will take and one of our, everybody knows Brian Caddo, I'm sure. Brian came on with Adam and I on a call about 2 weeks ago. we have a little AI mini mastermind where we talk about this stuff. And Brian was showing me some stuff that he's done, and that just floored me. I was just like, oh my God, that Syndication Academy with the AI component, we should absolutely revive this. And so I've thought about it, started to set it up. I haven't messed with it since. But N8N, where you can take a trigger, an RSS feed, whatever, and it does, by the way, it doesn't have to be from the money site. So you could use like Blogger or, WordPress.com or whatever you want, as Medium even as the primary blog, and then you would use that as the trigger point. So you would publish content at the original trigger, then the RSS feed or however you decide for it to find that new post from the source, whatever, however you set the trigger up. Once it has new content, then instead of it just republishing that content, that same exact content, it can feed into a chat GPT or whatever, Claude or whatever it is that you integrate as the AI agent. So to then analyze the content, you can set prompts in there with specific guidelines. You can even pre-feed the chat, right, with content that about the products and services of the company, frequently asked questions. So basically, like a knowledge base, you can feed all of that into the chat, and then that chat now becomes the receiver of that first piece of content. And then that chat with the prompts that you set can then rewrite that content. You could say rewrite the content, keeping the topic intact, but picking a subtopic to then rewrite a new article about a subtopic that supports the original article, and then republish that, the first version of it on, let's say, Blogger, and then going to create a second version of that with a different subtopic relevant to the top level topic that was originally published in the original article. And you're going to now write a whole new article about the subtopic to support the primary topic that is now going to be published on WordPress.com, right? And you can add all these different targeted platforms, different social media, branded web or branded blogs, etc., that can all be attached now to this. And every time instead of it being the same piece of content just republished or the same piece of content rewritten, now it's one piece of content that's kind of a top level topic term or whatever. And then all the supporting content now that is specific and unique to a subtopic within that main topic that is now published, linking back to the original post. And it could all, by the way, it can also link back directly to the main website. The point that I'm trying to make now is that you now have the ability, because of AI, to take, with all these advanced prompts and the prompt chaining or the agent chaining, right, that you could put together in N8N to make it to where you have every single piece of content from one original piece of content is now written with specific parameters to keep, you can have specific structure recommendations within the prompts and everything about how you want the articles written, the number of H1s or excuse me, H2s, subheadings, etc. All that kind of stuff can be put in there, and it can then be automated through these AI agents. And I just use N8N for that because I had set that up as I'm building that out. But you could do it with any of them, make any of those whatsoever out there. Okay, does that make sense? And I think that's where the biggest, like, I think there's an opportunity there to build an app that will do that, to where all you have to do is really focus in on generating content from one source. And then it's going to automatically cascade through all these different platforms and blogs, et cetera, that you've set up, but it will all be unique and original content, right? Instead of always being republished content. So I think that's where really the big thing is going to go, like as far as like how, and that's why I said, getting back to the original, the first question that we saw here about, this is my kind of what I've been thinking a lot about for the last few weeks about how I should be moving my business and like forward and evolving to get away from just SEO and more to traditional marketing, but and still in the digital environment. And so using the example that I just described about using N8N or something like that, you could very quickly develop those buyer personas and then the different sales, the cycles within the stages within the sales cycle, excuse me, and develop content. Remember, you only have to really come up with the concepts one time for each buyer persona and then one time for each stage within the buying cycle that you want to target, because you might not want to target all of them. And then you come up with that one time and you just create. And by the way, this is why I keep telling everybody, go into one industry, guys, because if you're in one industry, you can develop all this stuff out and then you can start running with it and refine it, right? Improve it as you go by based upon conversion tracking and all that kind of stuff. You can determine what is most effective and constantly refine it. If you try to do this across multiple industries, you're going to be stuck in the setup process most of the time. And so that's why I've not done a whole lot with the rank bridge stuff, is because I haven't had the time. It is very, very time consuming. And I get it. I understand the whole point. It's all that setup, but there's got to be ways that we can make it more efficient, right? And so that's kind of what I've been thinking about a lot the last couple of weeks. But unfortunately, I haven't had a lot of time to play with either Rank Bridge or the N8N, finish setting that up because I just haven't had the time. I'm hoping in another week to 10 days I'll be caught up, and then I want to get back onto that again. So ask me again in a couple of weeks, Alex. I think there's a real opportunity though for using AI to kind of help us develop that stuff out in a very efficient way and then produce all the content, um, and just create a much bigger footprint for the client, so to speak. All right.